Hi, my name is Sage, and this week, I wanted to make a wizard out of clay, but not just any wizard, a wizard that is a whale and lizard combined. So when you put their names together, it's the wizard! And to get started on this journey, I'm gonna need some tinfoil. So then I fold that up hot dog style before then folding it hamburger style, so now it kind of looks like a semicolon, but I want to make this wizard a little bit thicker, so I take even more tinfoil and wrap it up in that, and this is what it looks like. So now I'm gonna take this and cover it with clay, and bam! And this is probably the only thing that goes right on the first try. And you may be like, Sage, you're just carving in a smile. What could possibly go wrong here? Everything! I carve his smile in so many different times. And even here, I don't like the sides of it, so I'm smushing it out and it's just disappearing. Then I hated his chin, so I decided to move that in as well, because why not? Next, I give him some belly ridges because whales have that. But just to let you know, I will be doing this multiple times because again, everything kept going wrong. But that's okay, you know, that's how I learn. Speaking of learning, I give him some eye sockets, and this will be the first attempt of a lot as well. I can't decide if I want his eyes to be big or small, because decisions are hard. And just like his face here, I add more clay, and then, you know, I just keep adding more and more as the video goes on, because I don't know when to stop. And speaking of not stopping, I then give him some added clay to his cheeks, and then I blend all of that out, and then I just continue to blend everything else out as much as I can, and I got rid of his smile and his belly ridges in the process, so then I add those right back in. And since no whale is complete without a tail, obviously I have to make him a tail, so I take some clay and I make a similar shape to the end of a hockey stick, and then I make that again, so bam, there's two, yay! So now I can attach those two to the end of him, so now he's really looking like a whale, which is great because he's part whale, part lizard, full wizard. And to attach them, I use more clay to blend everything all together, so now that his tail is all ready to go. And on the first try too, that was exciting for me because everything goes downhill pretty quickly. So here I get some tin foil and start to scrunch it up to make an eyeball, and then cover it with some clay, and I'm not sure, get it? Why I thought adding this much was the move, because I made it way too big, like what is this? So then I take some clay off and roll it all over again and put the eye in his socket, and I'm like, you know what? That's good enough. So then I make another one, bam, now he has two eyes, and don't get attached to them because I do change them later. And now I get even more tinfoil, and you may be like, Sage, what's with all this tinfoil? I am making the arm now. That doesn't sound too crazy, and it's not too crazy. I make a little arm shape, bam, put clay on it, arm. That's pretty standard, right? And now I'm gonna blend in the arm to his body. Everything's going great, but then I get distracted. I start putting clay on his head, but I can't just leave it there. I have to blend it out. So now I'm using the ball stylus to make it all smooth. But I'm not just happy by adding one piece of clay. I have to add two pieces of clay because now I'm in hyperdrive. I have to add so many things, like a new mustache, because obviously his face needed a little bit more clay for whatever reason. And now I'm kind of looking at him and realizing he looks like a frog, but I decide to ignore that. And now I begin on my quest on making his hand, which sounds like it wouldn't be a big deal, right? Wrong. Everything went from bad to worse. So what happened here was I took a little piece of clay to make the thumb, and then I took my pointy stylus and carved out the fingers out of the circle that I laid down for the hand. Next, I take the little sausages that I carved out and kind of spiral them a little bit so they look like fingers, and everything's looking like it's gonna be okay, right? But it's not though. But then I have these other little pieces of clay that I've already baked like a while ago when I was making my spooky cupcakes, so they're kind of like little teeth, and I was gonna use them for the nails, so I shoved them into the fingers, and it's not looking too good, as you can see. And so I ripped the hand off thinking maybe it's the angle that I'm working at. So then I smooth out the hand a little bit more just to make it more hand-like, before then taking a pre-baked nail and putting some clay on the end of it and then attaching it to the hand thinking this will make it look like a finger. Instead, I made this monstrosity. It doesn't look right. And so I put the hand on the arm just to see if it looks right, and it just looks like a flapjack. So I ripped it off. And I rip off all the individual fingers too, because I just wasn't having it. So then I try again and basically do the exact same thing, but this time with more pizzazz. And by more pizzazz, I mean I tone it down and leave his fingers a little bit boxy. And this time I krilled it. Ha! Get it, krill? Before then taking out my scaling stylus and run that up and down his arms, so now it kind of looks more lizardly, which I like. And since my brain is very scrambled at this point, I am also gonna put more clay on his head and give him a second arm. So whoop bam! He got more clay on his head and now he has a second arm, yay! But now his face is the problem because he's looking like a frog. So in order to fix that, I decided to give him some eyebrows, as if that's going to help the problem. It doesn't. Honestly, I feel like it even makes it worse. But once I get done the brow debacle, I then decide, you know what? His belly ridges are gone again because I was just doing too much. So I add them back in, but I add even more this time because, you know, whales just have a lot of them. So I just, you know, go ham. And speaking of going ham, I add even more clay to his head because I'm thinking this will solve all my problems. But in fact, it doesn't. So then I rip apart his face because it's just, that's what the real problem is. And I don't just stop at the front of his face, I also rip out his eyeballs too, because you know, they just aren't giving whale lizard, they're giving frog, and I'm looking for a wizard, you know? So now that I have successfully squished and smushed everything in his face and it's now looking like a nub, I then, whoop bam, smooth it out. This is where I think adding eye sockets will help me on my journey, and it doesn't, so then I take clay from the end of him and put that in the eye socket because that makes sense. Why would I do that? This doesn't... Why did I do that? Next, I put in another eye socket before then taking my scaling stylus and running that up and down the whale lizard because that's just what needed to happen next, I guess. Plus now with the scales, he's giving a little bit more of lizard vibes, which is good because he's looking like a whale with arms. And the lizardness needs to be amped up. And speaking of amped up, I then take some small pieces of clay and put them on the back of his neck, and then I take my ball stylus and put in a little socket in each of them before then blending those pieces of clay to the body, as these will be the little holders for the horns that I'm gonna give him. And for the horns, I'm gonna use the pre-baked fangs that I was gonna use for nails, but now they're gonna be horns. They're versatile. But now I want to give him some more horns, so then I end up making my own by just making a little cone shape, and then I make a ton of them and I put them on the edges of his belly ridges, and I do that on both sides. So now he looks like this. I'm kind of modeling him after the horned lizard, and this is a picture of him. And what do whales and lizards have in common? Eyes. So I add them in again. After that, I rolled a bunch of little cones off screen and I'm putting them on his fingernails, so now he has nails but they're on top instead of in the finger, which I think looks fantastic. Ha! Get it? Because now the fingers are not being deformed. And now that he has his nails done, I move on to giving him a hat. So remember the tinfoil that I used for one of his eyes? I take that and smush some more clay on that and make another cone, and then I add more clay on the bottom of it to make a hat shape. So now he has a little wizard hat but with flair. Next, I'm gonna add some scars all over his body because he's obviously a badass too, because why not? Part whale, part lizard, full wizard. But I want to add some more whale detailing, so I'm gonna take out a chunk in his mouth so I can then add, you know how whales have those teeth but they're like hair teeth? I'm gonna add that. So I take out all the clay to add a little bit more in because I could see some tinfoil poking through. So once I add enough clay and carve a little bit more around his mouth too to add that extra oomph of whaleness, I then go in with my ball stylus and my pointy stylus and run it up and down in his mouth to make the illusion of whale teeth. Next, I touch up the bottom of his lip and his chin using the ball stylus before then taking a different type of pointy stylus and poking it in the whale lizard a little bit everywhere to give him some more texture, and wha-bam, this is what he looks like. So now that he's ready to be popped into the oven, I then wha-bam, put him in the oven, and this is what he looks like. Pretty much exactly the same, which I'm excited. Nothing fell off. That's exciting for me. So now I can start painting, and I start by painting the back of him all black, as well as his tail and arms and head, before then moving on to his belly ridges, and I use a mixture of white and yellow, and I don't do the best job at mixing them, but it's good enough for the first coat. And here I'm taking some green paint and going over his arms and his hands just to kind of give him more of a stereotypical lizard vibe, before then going over his back with some blue because whales are known to be blue, and then I go over the blue with some white just to kind of make it pop, and I blend those two colors together. And since I like the pop of the white so much, I also do it on his arms as well, before then moving on to his hat. And his hat, I paint a yellow and blue combo in order to make this green, and this is just the first layer. So then I will bam do a second one, and I also paint his back ridges around his horns the exact same color as whale. Get it? Next, I begin to paint in his scars using pink, and after I paint them in, I use my finger and rub the excess paint off. Because since there's a divot and my paintbrush is a little thicker than the divot, there's gonna be excess on the sides anyway, so just rubbing it off made sense in my brain. And after that's all done, I then move on to painting his lips, and I use pink and blue to make a purpley color. Then after that, I move on to painting it red on top of that while it's still a little bit wet to really give that gummy appearance. I then stared at his arms too long and decided I was just gonna dry brush them a little bit with some black, because why not? I then begin to paint both of his eyes a yellow and white combo, but a little bit more white than yellow, before then moving on to his teeth, and I paint them with a yellow and white combo as well, but I put a little bit more yellow in it just so they can stand out a little bit more. I then move on to painting his horns, and I go with a reddish brown color, and the reason why is because when you look at the horned lizard, they have kind of like these browny reddish tint horns on them, and I was like, you know what, that's pretty cool, I'm gonna go with that. So then I did, yay, and I carried that onto his nails as well, so everything's all mitchy matchy. And going with the lizard theme, I then move on to painting his eyes, and I do a slit because, you know, lizards have that slit for the eyes, and I paint it black for the both of them before then moving on to doing some touch-ups. I add a little bit more blue on his back and his cheeks and his face, and I also touch up his eyes and his hat, and that's pretty much it. That's the craft. I would like to say thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it, and now it's time for the glamour shots.